A quiet employee carries a secret that almost no one sees. When a new manager crosses her path, nothing will ever be the same. The Valley Star supermarket was almost empty at that time of night. The fluorescent lights bathed the freshly waxed floor with an artificial glow that contrasted with the darkness outside. Carlsville slept while some employees finished their shifts. Andrew Nelson, recently transferred as manager of this branch, walked through the aisles making his final round before releasing the night crew. He had been there for only 3 weeks and still felt like a stranger in this environment. Andrew was 35 years old and carried in his gaze the experience of someone who had worked in various branches of the chain. His face, with strong features and stubble, revealed the fatigue of another day, immersed in spreadsheets, reports, and endless meetings with suppliers. The transfer to Carlsville hadn't been a choice but a company necessity after problems with the previous manager. So far, he wasn't sure if he had made the right choice in accepting the challenge. As he walked down the corridor leading to the break room, Andrew mentally planned his agenda for the next day. It would be a busy Saturday, with weekend promotions and the inauguration of a new organic products section. His thoughts were interrupted by an almost imperceptible sound. Someone was crying softly in the employee room, whose door was ajar. The sound was restrained, as if the person was trying to hide their own pain. Andrew hesitated at the door. As the new manager, he was still trying to find the balance between authority and closeness with the team. Interfering in an intimate moment might seem invasive, but ignoring it didn't seem right either. After a few seconds of indecision, he took a deep breath and pushed the door slowly without making noise. Sitting on the worn-out sofa in the room, hugging her own knees, was Casey Davis, one of the cashiers from the evening shift. She was unsuccessfully trying to wipe away tears with the sleeve of her navy blue uniform. Her curly brown hair was tied in a messy bun, and her eyes, normally attentive and kind, were red and swollen. Andrew recognized her immediately. Since his arrival, Casey had caught his attention with her quiet efficiency. Always punctual, polite with customers and dedicated to tasks, but with a look that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Unlike the other cashiers who chatted animatedly during breaks, she kept to herself, as if preserving her energy for something more important happening outside those walls. When she noticed the manager's presence, Casey quickly straightened up and ran her hands over her face, trying to erase the traces of tears. "I'm sorry, Mr. Nelson," she said, her voice still choked. "I'm just leaving. I only needed a minute." Andrew felt her embarrassment, but didn't back away. "It's okay, Casey. No need to rush," he replied in a calm voice, keeping his distance so as not to invade her space further. "Can I help with anything?" "It's nothing important," she responded automatically, like someone accustomed to minimizing their own problems. "Just tired. Long day." Andrew knew there was more behind those words. Nobody cries like that from simple fatigue. But he also knew that trust needed to be built, especially in an environment where hierarchy created invisible barriers between people. "We all have difficult days," he commented, sitting in a chair on the other side of the room, giving her the space she seemed to need. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it." Casey looked at him briefly, as if assessing whether she could trust him. Her brown eyes seemed to weigh each word before pronouncing it. "It's just my little brother. Peter is having difficulties at school, and the teacher requested new supplies that weren't on the list at the beginning of the year," she explained, her voice gaining firmness when speaking about her brother. "With the rent increase this month, things will be tight, but we'll manage, we always do." Andrew nodded, now understanding a bit more about the employee's life. As a manager, he had access to all employees' files, but those papers rarely revealed the true stories behind the names. "If you need flexibility in your schedule to resolve these issues, we can talk," he offered, trying to find a balance between his professional role and a human gesture. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," Casey replied with a polite but distant smile. "Peter stays at the full-time school program, and I can handle everything on my days off." The response came with a movement to stand up, signaling that she considered the conversation over. Andrew respected the gesture and also stood, making way for her to leave. "Casey," he called when she was already at the door, "my door is always open, not just for work matters." She nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement, and left. Andrew remained alone in the room, watching the wall clock that marked 10:37 p.m. That brief encounter had awakened something in him, a distant memory of his own mother arriving exhausted from double shifts, carrying worries she never shared. The next day, the supermarket was buzzing with typical Saturday activity. Customers roamed the aisles pushing overloaded carts, children ran between the shelves, and employees were bending over backwards to keep everything running perfectly. Andrew observed the store's movement from his glass office on the mezzanine. From there, he could see the entire operation, including the checkouts where Casey worked. She maintained the same efficiency as always, typing codes precisely, packaging products carefully and smiling politely at customers. But now, knowing a bit more about her life, he could perceive the subtle signs of worry behind that professional facade. During the lunch break, while touring the store checking product restocking, Andrew passed through the school supplies aisle. He stopped for a moment, looking at the notebooks, pencils, and backpacks carefully organized. An idea began to form in his mind. In the following weeks, Andrew started paying more attention to Casey. He noticed how she sometimes skipped her own lunch to attend to customers in long lines. He realized she never complained when she needed to extend her shift due to colleagues' delays. He observed her kindness with elderly customers who took longer at the checkout. He also noticed the increasingly deep, dark circles under her eyes and the fatigue that seemed to grow each day. One afternoon, passing by the women's locker room before the start of the shift, he heard raised voices. He recognized Lucy's voice, one of the oldest cashiers, known for her difficult temperament. "If you want to be the perfect employee to impress the new manager, that's your problem. But don't make us look bad by comparison," Lucy was saying in an accusatory tone. "I'm not trying to impress anyone," Casey's voice responded calmly. "I'm just doing my job. Little Miss Perfect, everyone knows you only got this job because the old manager knew your mother." Andrew decided to intervene before the situation escalated. He knocked on the door, and the voices immediately fell silent. Upon entering, he found Casey and Lucy on opposite sides of the locker room, the tension still palpable in the air. "Any problem, ladies?" he asked, looking from one to the other. "None, Mr. Nelson," Lucy quickly replied with a forced smile. "Just a conversation between colleagues." Casey said nothing, just closed her locker and prepared to leave. Her eyes met Andrew's for a brief moment, a mixture of embarrassment and resignation. He realized that this type of situation probably wasn't new to her. That night, after all the employees had gone home, Andrew remained in his office, reflecting on what he had witnessed in the last few days. Casey Davis wasn't just another efficient employee. She was someone silently fighting against difficult circumstances without seeking recognition or help. Something about her awakened in him a need to make a difference, to use his position for more than just meeting corporate goals. Before leaving, Andrew passed by the bulletin board in the employee room. Among the work schedules and company announcements, he discreetly fixed a small folded note. No signature, no indication of the recipient, just a handwritten phrase, "You are not alone." If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from, and we'll continue. Monday morning arrived with a light rain that painted Carlsville gray. The movement at Valley Star Supermarket was less than normal, allowing employees to breathe a little after the weekend frenzy. Casey arrived punctually at 8 a.m. as always, her uniform impeccable despite the damp weather. Her hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she carried a worn backpack where she kept her lunch and personal belongings. Upon entering the employee room to store her things, her gaze was immediately drawn to the bulletin board. There, among work schedules and management communications, was a small folded paper that wasn't there the day before. Casey approached, curious. Upon opening the note and reading the message, "You are not alone." She felt a shiver run down her spine. There was no signature, no clue about who might have left those simple but powerful words. Her first instinct was to look around, as if she could find the message's author watching her reaction. The room was empty, except for Mr. Joe, the store's oldest security guard, who was having his usual coffee while leafing through the day's newspaper. He didn't even raise his eyes when she entered. Casey hesitated for a moment. Should she ignore the note? It could be some kind of bad joke, perhaps the work of Lucy or some other colleague who was bothered by her discretion, but something in those words seemed to touch a sensitive spot inside her. With a quick movement, she removed the paper from the board, carefully folded it, and put it in her uniform pocket. Throughout her shift, while registering purchases and attending to customers with her usual efficiency, Casey found herself thinking about the mysterious note. Who could have left it? And why? Was her fragility so evident? The idea bothered her. Since taking responsibility for Peter after their mother's disappearance, she had built a wall around herself, determined not to show weakness. Peter was only 8 years old and depended completely on her. After Ellen, their mother, didn't return from that night shift 4 years ago, Casey had become both mother and father to her brother. At 24, she gave up her own dreams of going to college to work 2 jobs, mornings at the supermarket and evenings as a waitress at a downtown restaurant 3 times a week. On other days, she dedicated herself to helping Peter with his lessons and keeping the small house they rented organized. Her lunch break arrived and she headed to the cafeteria, where she found Teresa, the bakery's pastry chef, with whom she maintained a friendly relationship. "Annoying rain, isn't it?" Teresa commented as Casey sat with her simple lunchbox, rice, beans, and a piece of grilled chicken. "They say it will last all week." "I hope not," Casey replied, thinking about the clothes she would need to wash that wouldn't dry easily. "Peter has physical education tomorrow and he hates when it's transferred to the classroom." "How's the little rascal?" Teresa asked with a genuine smile. Among all colleagues, she was one of the few who showed real interest in Casey's life. "Growing too fast," Casey smiled, and for a moment her face lit up. Peter was her light, her reason to get up every morning, no matter how exhausted she was. "He's fascinated by dinosaurs now, draws T-Rexes everywhere, even on the walls." The conversation flowed naturally, a small breather in the loaded routine. Teresa talked about her newborn granddaughter, showing photos on her cell phone with grandmother's pride. For a few minutes, Casey allowed herself to forget her worries, the late rent, the school supplies she still needed to buy, the mysterious note. From his office on the mezzanine, Andrew discreetly observed the cafeteria. He saw Casey talking with Teresa, noticed how her face transformed when talking about her brother. It was as if an internal light turned on momentarily, illuminating features that normally remained in the shadows. He smiled involuntarily. His plan had begun with that simple note, but he wasn't sure how to proceed. Andrew wasn't the type to interfere in employees' personal lives. In his previous positions, he always maintained a professional distance, limiting himself to meeting goals and ensuring the smooth operation of the stores he managed. But something about Casey had awakened an unusual empathy. Perhaps it was the fact that she reminded him so much of his own mother. Caroline Nelson had worked her entire life as a supermarket cashier, raising Andrew alone after his father's abandonment. Or perhaps it was simply the silent dignity with which Casey faced her daily battles. At the end of that afternoon, when Casey went to get her backpack from the locker room, she found a surprise in her locker, a small box wrapped in simple brown paper, without a card or identification. She looked around, confused, before carefully opening the package. Inside was a set of professional colored pencils, the kind she had seen Peter admire in the stationery store, but which were far beyond her financial possibilities. Her heart raced. First the note, now this. Who could be behind these gestures? And how did they know about Peter and his passion for drawing? Casey quickly put the box in her backpack, feeling both grateful and uncomfortable. She wasn't used to receiving help, much less from an anonymous benefactor. Leaving the supermarket, Casey almost collided with Andrew, who was entering carrying a stack of documents. "Sorry, Mr. Nelson," she murmured, taking a step to the side. "No problem, Casey," he replied with a cordial smile. "How was your day?" The question was simple, ordinary, but something in his tone of voice made her look directly into his eyes. There was a gentleness there that disconcerted her. "Normal," she replied automatically, and then, without knowing exactly why, added, "Actually a little strange." Andrew raised his eyebrows in a gesture of genuine curiosity. "Strange how?" Casey hesitated. Should she mention the note and the gift? What if it was him who was responsible? Or worse, what if it wasn't, and he thought she was making things up to get attention? "Nothing important," she retreated. "Just accumulated fatigue, I guess." Andrew nodded, understanding. "Rest well, then. See you tomorrow." Casey said goodbye with a wave and went out into the rainy afternoon, tightening her coat around herself. Inside her backpack, The box of pencils seemed to weigh more than it should. The path to Peter's school was short, just a few blocks, but today it seemed endless under the persistent drizzle. When she arrived at the school gate, Peter was already waiting with other students who participated in the after-school program. His round face lit up when he saw her, and he ran in her direction, backpack swinging awkwardly on his small back. "Casey, look what I got today," he exclaimed, extending to her a new lunchbox with colorful dinosaur prints. "Teacher Renee said someone left it at the school office for me." Casey froze, looking at the lunchbox as if it were an alien object. It was exactly like the one Peter had pointed out in a sale catalog days ago. Who left this, Peter?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I don't know. The teacher said it was delivered by a guy on a motorcycle, but there was no card or anything," the boy replied, oblivious to his sister's perplexity. "Isn't it cool? Now I don't have to use that plastic bag that always tears." Casey smiled mechanically, holding her brother's hand as they walked home. Her mind was buzzing with questions. First the note, then the pencils, now the lunchbox. Who could know so much about her life? Who would have the money and interest to do all this? And mainly, why? That night, after Peter finally fell asleep in his bed, ecstatic with his new colored pencils and the dinosaur drawings he had made, Casey sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of tea. The rain continued outside, a liquid curtain that isolated the world. She took the note from her pocket and read it several times. "You are not alone." 4 simple words that somehow had penetrated years of carefully constructed defenses. For the first time in a long time, Casey allowed herself to cry without trying to contain the tears. It wasn't a cry of sadness, but something more complex, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and fear of the unknown. Someone, somewhere, had noticed her silent struggle. Someone cared. And that, so simple and yet so extraordinary, was almost more than she could process. At the other end of town, in his modest apartment, Andrew contemplated the rainy night through the window. An old photograph rested in his hands, him and his mother both smiling in front of an improvised birthday cake. He wondered what Caroline would think of his recent gestures, if she would consider them invasive or genuinely altruistic. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Mom," he murmured to the photograph, before carefully putting it away in the bedside table drawer. The rain continued to fall, connecting different parts of the city with its silver threads, uniting stories that at first glance seemed separated by time and circumstance, but which, in reality, were about to intertwine in ways none of those involved could imagine. The week advanced with the persistent rain that gave no respite to Carlsville. The streets near Valley Star Supermarket began to accumulate water, forming small urban lakes at the lower corners. Andrew observed the weather through his office window, a cup of coffee cooling on the desk full of reports. That continuous rain brought memories, some that he preferred to keep submerged at the bottom of his memory. There was something about storms that always transported him to that specific night 15 years ago. It was also a rainy Monday, when he received the phone call that would change his life. His mother, Caroline, had fainted during the night shift at the supermarket where she worked. The diagnosis came quickly and brutally, cancer in an advanced stage. 3 months later, Andrew found himself alone in the world at 20 years old, with a hospital debt and the promise he had made to his mother on her complicated deathbed, that he would use his life to make a difference in others. The intercom on his desk interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Nelson, the meeting with the department coordinators starts in 5 minutes, announced Nancy's voice, his administrative assistant. "Thank you, Nancy." "I'm on my way," he replied, running his hand over his face to push away the memories. The meeting room was full when he arrived. The coordinators from all sectors were waiting with their clipboards and tablets. Andrew noticed that Casey was also there, replacing Marcy, the checkout coordinator, who had called earlier advising about a problem with her sick son. "Good morning, everyone," Andrew began, assuming his professional posture. "Let's get straight to the point. The rains are affecting our movement, but we can't let them affect our results. We need strategies to reverse the sales decline this week." The meeting proceeded with discussions about flash promotions, reorganization of products on the shelves, and local marketing campaigns. Casey remained silent most of the time, only taking meticulous notes. Andrew noticed how she seemed divided between the attention necessary for the meeting and some personal concern that showed in her distant gaze. When the meeting ended, Andrew asked Casey to stay. She seemed tense, as if fearing she had done something wrong. "Is there a problem, Mr. Nelson?" she asked, firmly holding her clipboard against her chest, like a shield. "No, no problem," he assured. "I just wanted to thank you for replacing Marcy today. I know this means more work for you." "It's my job," she responded automatically. "Even so, it's an additional effort that deserves recognition," he insisted, observing how she seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "Is everything okay with you, Casey? You seem worried." She hesitated, slightly biting her lower lip. "It's just this rain," she finally replied. "Our street always floods, and the water is already reaching near the sidewalk. I'm worried about our house." Andrew felt a pang of concern. "If you need to leave earlier today, there's no problem." "That won't be necessary," she replied quickly. "The neighbor is keeping an eye out, and Peter is at school. I'll sort it out when I finish my shift." Andrew nodded, respecting her independence. As he watched her leave the room, an idea began to form in his mind. At the end of the afternoon, when Casey was about to end her shift, Andrew called her to his office again. "Casey, I know you said you didn't need to leave early, but I just received an alert from Civil Defense about your neighborhood," he lied, showing a fake email on his computer. "The rains have worsened and they're evacuating some streets as a precaution. I think you'd better go now." Her face paled. "Oh God, Peter." "Don't worry, I've already called his school," Andrew continued with his elaborate story. "They're keeping the children safe until the guardians arrive. Maurice will take you," he added, referring to the store driver who made deliveries. "The streets are complicated for public transportation." Casey seemed torn between gratitude and discomfort at receiving help. "I can't accept—" "It's not a favor, Casey," Andrew gently interrupted. "It's the company's safety protocol. Maurice is already waiting at the back exit." Without alternatives, she accepted. Before she left, Andrew handed her a bag of basic products. "Storm emergency kit," he explained with a smile, "in case you get stranded." In fact, the bag contained food he knew would be missing in her house: milk, bread, fruit, some chocolates for Peter, and cleaning products. There was also an envelope with enough money to cover any emergency, discreetly placed at the bottom of the bag. Casey, absorbed in her concern about the possible flood, just thanked him quickly and left. Andrew breathed a sigh of relief. His plan had worked perfectly. There was no real civil defense alert, and Peter's school was functioning normally. It was just his way of ensuring she got home earlier, and with extra resources to face any real problems the rain might cause. 2 hours later, when he finally left the supermarket, Andrew made a detour on his usual path. He drove slowly through the neighborhood where he knew Casey lived, just to check the situation. As he suspected, there were points of flooding, but nothing as serious as he had suggested. He located her street from the address he had consulted in her registration file. The small corner house with the blue gate was intact, although the water in the street already reached the curb. Through the illuminated window, he glimpsed Casey and a small boy, Peter, he presumed, sitting at the table, apparently having dinner. There was something comforting about that simple scene, something that warmed his heart in an unexpected way. Satisfied to know they were well, he continued on his way, disappearing into the rainy night. The next morning, the rain finally gave a break, although the sky remained grey and threatening. Casey arrived at work earlier than normal, seeming rested for the first time in weeks. Upon opening her locker in the changing room, she found a small plant in a pot decorated with dinosaur drawings, along with a handwritten card, "To brighten your home on cloudy days." She picked up the pot carefully, an involuntary smile appearing on her lips. It was a succulent, a plant known for its resilience and ability to survive even with little water, much like herself, she thought. Another mysterious gift? Teresa's voice startled her. The pastry chef was standing at the door of the changing room, observing her with a curious smile. "It seems so," Casey replied, showing the plant. "You have a secret admirer," Teresa commented in a playful tone. "That's so romantic." Casey felt her cheeks warm. "I don't think it's anything like that," she replied, carefully storing the pot in her locker. "Must be just someone being kind." "Disinterested kindness is rare these days, dear," Teresa retorted, adjusting her baker's hat. "I'd bet on the new manager. I've seen how he looks at you." "Mr. Nelson?" Casey almost choked at the suggestion. "He's just professional." "If you say so," Teresa shrugged, leaving with a mischievous smile. "Anyway, it's good to see someone taking care of you for a change." Alone again, Casey reflected on Teresa's words. Could it be possible that Andrew was behind all those gestures? She couldn't imagine why the manager would be interested in her personal life, and how would he know about Peter, about his likes, about their needs? The answer came later that day when she was organizing promotional coupons in the administration room. In a half-open drawer, she saw a folder with her name, Employee, Casey Davis. Curiosity was stronger than her sense of privacy. Looking quickly to see if there was no one nearby, she opened the folder. Inside, she found not only her employment documents, but also an older file. It was from her mother, Ellen Davis, who had worked at that same store years ago. With the file, there was a handwritten note from a previous manager. Exemplary employee despite personal difficulties. Single mother of 2 children, always punctual and dedicated. Casey felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know her mother's record still existed there. She continued leafing through the documents and found something even more surprising. A copy of an old newspaper clipping. The headline said, "Accident on Jefferson Highway leaves injured." In the small, blurry photo, Casey recognized her mother being attended to by paramedics. Next to her, a young man held the hand of a frightened teenager, herself at 14 years old. The memory of that day came like lightning. The intense rain, the car skidding on the wet road, the impact. And then, a young man who had stopped to help, who stayed with them until the ambulance arrived, who held her hand while she cried in fear for her injured mother. She had made a drawing for him afterward, in the hospital. An angel with a blue shirt, like the one he wore that day. "My God," she murmured, feeling her legs weaken. "It can't be. Casey, are you okay?" Andrew's voice brought her back to reality. He was standing at the door, observing her with concern. Quickly, she closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. "Yes, I'm sorry," she replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I was just looking for the dairy promotion coupons." Andrew nodded, but his eyes revealed he wasn't entirely convinced. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Yes, thank you," she replied, randomly picking up some coupons from the table. As she hurriedly left the room, Casey felt her heart beating erratically. Could it be possible? Was Andrew Nelson the young man who had helped them in that accident years ago? And if so, had he recognized her? Was that why he was making all those gestures? The question spun in her mind as she mechanically returned to her workstation. Such an extraordinary coincidence seemed impossible, but at the same time it would explain a lot. She needed to discover the truth, but didn't know how to approach the subject without seeming invasive, or worse, desperate for attention. That afternoon, leaving work, Casey decided to stop by a stationery store that was on the way to Peter's school. She bought a simple notebook and began to note all the mysterious gifts she had received, the dates, and possible clues about her anonymous benefactor. If her suspicion was correct, and Andrew was really that young man from the accident, what would that mean? And why wasn't he saying anything directly? As she walked to pick up Peter, Casey didn't notice she was being observed from a distance by Andrew, who smiled as he saw her enter the stationery store. His plan was working, but he knew he needed to be patient. It wasn't time to reveal the whole truth yet. First, he needed to be sure Casey was ready to receive it. Saturday dawned with a timid sun trying to impose itself between persistent clouds. After a week of intense rains, Carlsville finally received a break, and residents took advantage to hang clothes to dry, clean clogged gutters, and breathe fresh air. In the small apartment she shared with Peter, Casey was taking advantage of her day off to organize the house. The boy was helping in his way, more hindering than aiding, while talking non-stop about the dinosaurs he had learned about in school. "Casey, did you know the Brachiosaurus had a huge neck to reach the leaves at the top of trees? The teacher said it was gentle, even being giant," Peter explained, while holding a feather duster almost bigger than him. "Just like you, right? Big and gentle," Casey replied, affectionately messing up her brother's hair. The boy smiled, displaying the gap left by a recently fallen baby tooth. At 8 years old, Peter was the image of his mother. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same determined chin, the same ease of smiling despite difficulties. It was like having a piece of Ellen still alive, breathing, growing. While organizing the shelf in the small living room, Casey found a box she hadn't opened in a long time. Inside, carefully stored, were some of her mother's belongings that she didn't have the courage to dispose of. A scarf with a lavender scent that was already fading, some simple costume jewelry, and an envelope with old photographs. Sitting on the worn rug in the living room, she began going through the photos one by one. Images of her childhood, of her young and smiling mother, of a time that now seemed to belong to another life. At the bottom of the envelope, she found a photo she didn't remember saving. Herself as a teenager in the hospital, drawing something on an improvised clipboard with a magazine. It was taken days after the highway accident, when her mother was still hospitalized with a broken leg and cracked ribs. Casey closed her eyes, letting the memory surface. She remembered the drawing she had made, an angel with a blue shirt, representing the young man who had stopped to help them on the road. He had stayed with them for hours, holding her hand when the paramedics took her mother away, then taking her to the hospital, waiting for news, buying hot chocolate to calm her down. "What's that, Casey?" Peter asked, noticing the scattered photos. "These are old photos from when I was younger," she replied softly, "and this one here is Mom." Peter picked up the photo where Ellen smiled in front of an improvised birthday cake, the last birthday they had celebrated together. "She was beautiful," the boy commented with the innocence of someone who knew his mother only through photos and stories. "Yes, she was," Casey agreed, feeling the familiar lump in her throat. "And do you know what she liked to do when it was sunny after many days of rain?" "What?" "Picnic in the park," Casey replied, a sudden idea emerging. "What do you think about doing that today?" Peter's face lit up. "Can we bring Rex?" he asked, referring to the dinosaur plush toy he never let go of. "Of course, every picnic needs a guard dinosaur," she smiled, putting the photos back in the envelope, except for the one from the hospital, which she set aside to look at later. As they prepared sandwiches and cut fruit for the improvised picnic, Casey couldn't stop thinking about the coincidence she had discovered. Could Andrew Nelson, her current boss, be the same young man who had helped her family years ago? And if so, why hadn't he mentioned anything? Why the anonymous gestures instead of a direct conversation? Jefferson Park was busy that Saturday morning. Families spread out across the lawn, taking advantage of the sun after days confined at home due to the rain. Casey found a space under a leafy tree, far enough from other people to have some privacy, but close enough to the playground so she could watch Peter while he played. As she spread a checkered cloth over the still damp grass, Casey spotted a familiar figure a few meters away. Andrew Nelson was walking alone on the running track that circled the lake, wearing shorts and a running t-shirt, earphones in his ears. He didn't see her, focused on his exercise. Casey felt her heart speed up. It was a perfect opportunity to observe him without the formal work environment, perhaps even to initiate a casual conversation that could lead to some revelation. But what would she say? "Are you by any chance the blue-shirted angel who saved my mother 15 years ago?" It seemed absurd when formulated that way. "Casey, can I go to the slide?" Peter asked, interrupting her thoughts. "So you can, but stay where I can see you," she responded automatically, her eyes still following Andrew, who was now stopping to stretch near a bench. As Peter ran towards the playground, Casey decided to act on impulse. She took one of the extra sandwiches she had prepared and walked in Andrew's direction, mentally rehearsing what she would say. He saw her when she was a few meters away. His face registered surprise, followed by a genuine smile. "Casey, what a coincidence," he commented, removing his earphones. "Good morning, Mr. Nelson," she responded formally, still uncertain about how to proceed. "Please, outside of work, you can call me Andrew," he requested, drying the sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "Enjoying the sun?" "Yes, I brought my brother for a picnic," she explained, pointing to where Peter was playing with other children. "Actually, I saw you, running and thought about offering a sandwich." "We made many." Andrew seemed touched by the gesture. "That's very kind of you." He accepted the sandwich wrapped in a napkin. "I was indeed needing a break." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sounds of children playing and birds singing. "Your brother seems to be having fun," Andrew finally commented, observing Peter, who was now going down the slide, hugging his dinosaur plush toy. "He loves the park," Casey replied, "especially after being stuck at home because of the rain." Another silence. Casey took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Andrew, can I ask you something personal?" He nodded, his expression suddenly alert, as if he knew what would come next. "You," she began, but was interrupted by Peter's sharp cry. "Casey! Casey! Look what I found!" The boy was running in her direction, holding something in his hands. When he reached them, he opened his small fingers to reveal a smooth and shiny stone. "It looks like a dinosaur scale, doesn't it?" he asked excitedly. "It's beautiful," Casey replied, bending down to be at her brother's height. "Peter, this is Mr. Andrew. He works with me at the supermarket." Peter raised his eyes to the tall man in front of him, studying him with the bare-faced curiosity typical of children. "Do you know about dinosaurs?" he asked directly. Andrew smiled, crouching down to also be at the boy's level. "I'm not an expert like you seem to be, but I know a few things," he replied seriously. "For example, I know that stone you found looks a lot like the scales of a stegosaurus." Peter's eyes widened. "How do you know that Stegosaurus is my favorite dinosaur?" The innocent question fell like a bomb. Casey quickly looked at Andrew, who seemed momentarily speechless. I think it was a lucky guess," he finally answered. "Stegosauruses are amazing with those plates on their backs, aren't they?" Peter nodded enthusiastically, apparently satisfied with the answer, but Casey noticed how Andrew avoided her questioning look. "Peter, why don't you go back to the playground while I talk a bit with Andrew?" she suggested gently. When the boy moved away, Casey turned to Andrew, determined. "It wasn't a coincidence, was it, you knowing about the Stegosaurus?" Andrew sighed, running his hand through his still damp hair from the exercise. "Casey, It's you who's been leaving the gifts, isn't it?" she continued, the words coming out rapidly now. "The note, the colored pencils, the dinosaur lunchbox, the plant. All of that was you." He didn't deny it, just held her gaze with an intensity that made her blush slightly. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why do all this anonymously?" Andrew indicated the nearby bench. "Can we sit down?" They settled side by side, maintaining a respectful distance. Andrew seemed to be organizing his thoughts, deciding where to start. "Do you remember an accident on Jefferson Highway about 15 years ago?" he finally asked. Casey's heart raced. So it was true. "It was you," she murmured, more a statement than a question. "The young man who stopped to help, who stayed with me at the hospital." Andrew nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "When I was transferred to this branch and saw your name on the employee list, I didn't make the connection immediately," he explained. "But then I saw you, and there was something familiar that I couldn't identify. It was only when I found you crying in the break room that something clicked. That same determined expression, even amid vulnerability." "But why not say anything?" Casey asked, confused. "Why all these secret gestures?" Andrew looked at the horizon, where the sun now shone fully on the lake. "I guess I was afraid you would find it strange, or worse, that you would think I was doing this out of pity," he answered honestly. "And also, there's something special about being able to help without expecting recognition. I learned that from my mother." "Your mother?" "Caroline," he replied, a reverent tone in his voice. "She was a supermarket cashier her entire life, raised me alone. She often worked double shifts, but never complained. She always said that small acts of kindness keep the world turning, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching." Casey felt a deep connection with those words. Her own mother had lived with that same philosophy. "She must be an incredible woman," she commented. "She was," Andrew gently corrected. "I lost her to complications 15 years ago, shortly after meeting you and your mother." Casey felt the weight of that revelation. While her family was recovering from the accident, he was facing his own personal tragedy. "I'm sorry," she murmured, resisting the impulse to touch his hand in a gesture of comfort. "Thank you," he replied. "You know, helping you two that day was one of the last things I did, before receiving the news about her illness. And the drawing you gave me, the blue-shirted angel, has stayed with me all these years. It was like a reminder of the purpose I promised her I'd follow." Casey felt tears forming in her eyes. It was a deeper and more meaningful story than she could ever have imagined. "I still have that drawing," Andrew continued. "It's framed in my apartment. It was the first thing I unpacked when I moved here. That's why the gifts for Peter," Casey understood. "It wasn't just for me, it was for all of us," Andrew completed. "For your mother, who reminded me so much of mine. For you, who faced so much being so young. For Peter, who deserves a bit of joy. And for me too, because helping you reconnects me with the promise I made. At that moment, observing the man beside her, Casey saw more than her boss, more than an anonymous benefactor. She saw someone who deeply understood what it meant to carry responsibilities, to lose someone important, and still choose kindness in a world often indifferent. In the distance, Peter waved enthusiastically, calling her to see something. Casey smiled back at her brother, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. "I need to go," she said, getting up. "But thank you. For everything. For the gifts. But especially for caring." Andrew also stood up. "Now that you know the truth, will the anonymous gift stop?" she asked, feeling strangely sad at this possibility. "That depends," he replied with an enigmatic smile. "Maybe I need an accomplice now." "What do you think about helping other people at the supermarket too? Small gestures, without recognition, just for the good they can do." Casey felt something awaken inside her, a possibility, a purpose beyond daily survival. "I would like that," she responded, surprising herself with the sincerity of her words. As she walked back to her picnic, where Peter was waiting impatiently to show more treasures he had found, Casey felt as if an invisible circle had closed. The past and present connected in mysterious ways, weaving a plot of meanings that transcended coincidences. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from, and we'll continue. The following weeks brought a subtle but noticeable change to the routine at Valley Star Supermarket. They weren't major structural transformations or new corporate policies, but small alterations in the atmosphere, as if the air conditioning now blew not just cold air, but also a light breeze of hope. It all started with the kindness board, a simple cork board installed near the employee cafeteria, where anonymous messages of gratitude and recognition began to appear. "Thank you to whoever covered my shift when my son was sick," one note said. "I appreciate whoever left that chocolate in my locker the day I arrived crying," said another. No one knew for sure who had initiated the practice, but each day new notes appeared, small drops of gratitude that were beginning to form an ocean of changes. Casey and Andrew were the silent architects of this revolution. Their pact, sealed on that sunny morning in the park, had transformed into a shared mission. During quick conversations in the corridor, exchanges of complicit glances in meetings or discreet messages left in drawers, they planned their next targets, employees who seemed to need a gesture of support or recognition. For Nancy, the administrative assistant who had recently lost her mother, they left a pot of violets, the deceased's favorites, as Casey discovered in a casual conversation in the break room. For Mr. Joe, the security guard who would turn 65 without fanfare, they organized a small surprise celebration from the employees, with a modest cake and a card signed by everyone. For young intern Debbie, who struggled to balance college and work, they created a carpooling scheme with other employees who lived near the university. No gesture was grandiose enough to draw attention, but all were significant enough to make a difference, and, most importantly, none bore Andrew or Casey's mark. They were simply manifestations of a community that, little by little, was rediscovering the value of caring for one another. At home, Peter noticed the changes in his sister. Casey arrived from work still tired, but there was a different glow in her eyes, a renewed energy in her movements. "Why are you smiling so much?" he asked one night, while she prepared dinner, humming softly. "Am I smiling?" Casey replied, surprised at having been so transparent. "All the time," Peter confirmed, drawing in his new dinosaur notebook, another mysterious gift that had appeared in his backpack the previous week. "Is it because of the man from the park, your boss?" Casey almost dropped the spoon she was using to stir the sauce. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "He looks at you the same way Matty's dad looks at his mom in the photos," Peter replied, with the disconcerting simplicity of children. "Like you're made of chocolate ice cream." Casey laughed, but felt her cheeks warm. "Andrew is just my boss, Peter, and we're just friends." "Friends who look at each other like ice cream," the boy insisted, returning to concentrate on his drawing, with an expression of someone who knows more than they should. That observation, however, planted a seed of restlessness in Casey. It was true that her relationship with Andrew had evolved in the last few weeks. What had begun as a connection based on a past event had transformed into a partnership, a friendship that grew with each small act of kindness they planned together. But was something more blossoming there? Something she hadn't allowed herself to consider until Peter's innocent eyes identified it? The next morning, while organizing products in the produce section, Casey was surprised by Lucy approaching, the cashier who had always been openly hostile to her. "Hey, Casey," Lucy called, seeming uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Casey nodded, suspicious. Previous interactions with Lucy had never been pleasant. "I just wanted to... well, thank you," Lucy said, the words seeming difficult to come out. "For what you did for my dad." Casey frowned, genuinely confused. "Your dad?" "The wheelchair," Lucy explained. "I know it was you who organized the collection among the employees to fix his motorized wheelchair. No one else knew he needed it." Casey opened her mouth to deny it, but then understood. It wasn't her, but Andrew. He must have heard about Lucy's father's situation and acted without telling her. "No need to thank me," Casey responded diplomatically. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have," Lucy insisted, and for the first time, there was no hostility in her gaze. "I wouldn't have done it for you. In fact, I've been quite unfair, and I'm sorry about that." The apology caught Casey completely off guard. She had never expected this kind of acknowledgement from Lucy. "It's all right," she responded automatically. "We all have our difficult days." Lucy nodded, seeming relieved to end that uncomfortable conversation, and quickly moved away. Casey remained standing among the piles of apples and bananas, trying to process what had just happened. How had Andrew known about Lucy's father, and why hadn't he told her about this specific initiative? The answer came during lunch, when she finally got a moment alone with him on the small outdoor patio that employees used to get fresh air. "Why didn't you tell me about Lucy's father's wheelchair?" she asked directly, without preambles. Andrew seemed momentarily surprised, but soon a comprehending smile appeared on his face. "She talked to you?" "Yes, she came to thank me." "Thinking it had been my idea." Andrew shrugged, biting into his apple. "I thought it would be better that way. You and Lucy have history. If she knew the idea came from me, she might think it was just the boss trying to keep peace between employees. Coming from you, especially considering how she treated you, it has more meaning." Casey shook her head, impressed with the depth of his thinking. "You really believe in this, don't you? In the power of small gestures?" "I have to believe," he replied, suddenly serious. "It's what keeps me going since I lost my mother. The idea that we can create waves of change with seemingly insignificant actions." There was a moment of silence between them, filled only by the distant sounds of traffic and the wind in the leaves of the sweet gum tree that shaded the patio. Casey felt a deep connection with Andrew in that instant, as if she could see through the layers of competent manager and anonymous benefactor to the man who still carried the pain of an old loss, transformed into purpose. "You know," she began, suddenly feeling vulnerable, "since I discovered it was you behind the gifts, I've been thinking a lot about coincidences and destiny." Andrew tilted his head, interested. "And have you reached any conclusion?" "Not exactly," she admitted, "but I think maybe some people enter our lives at specific moments for a reason, and sometimes they come back when we need them most, even if we don't know we're needing them." Their gazes met, and Casey felt something change in the air between them, as if a new possibility was opening. Before either could explore that moment, however, the patio door opened, and Teresa appeared. "Oh, sorry to interrupt," the pastry chef said with a mischievous smile. "I just came to let you know that the meeting with the suppliers has been moved up, Andrew. They arrived earlier." "Thank you, Teresa. I'm on my way," he replied, getting up. Before leaving, however, he looked at Casey. "Shall we continue this conversation later?" She nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and disappointed by the interruption. The rest of the week passed at a frantic pace. A special store anniversary promotion attracted crowds of customers, and all employees worked overtime to handle the demand. Casey and Andrew barely had time to exchange more than professional words in the corridors. On Friday, exhausted after a particularly intense day, Casey was surprised by an envelope in her locker. Inside were 2 tickets to the Carlsville Zoo and a small note written in Andrew's now familiar handwriting. "For Peter, I heard they have a new exhibition about dinosaurs and reptilian ancestors. Saturday, 10 a.m. The invitation was clearly directed so Peter could enjoy the exhibition, but the suggested time indicated that Andrew hoped to meet them there. An outing, not a romantic date, but still something that crossed the boundaries of a strictly professional relationship or even casual friendship. Casey put the tickets in her bag, feeling a mixture of enthusiasm and apprehension. Peter would be radiant, of course. But what did this new step in her relationship with Andrew mean? And was she ready to explore this unknown territory? On Saturday morning, the zoo was surprisingly quiet for a weekend. Casey and Peter arrived a few minutes before 10 a.m., the boy practically bouncing with excitement when seeing the posters announcing the exhibition, From Dinosaurs to Modern Reptiles, a 65-million-year journey. "Casey, look, they have a velociraptor skeleton," Peter exclaimed, pointing to the poster at the entrance. "And it says they have real fossils that we can touch." "Calm down, little paleontologist," Casey laughed, adjusting the backpack on her back. "Let's wait for our friend, and then we'll see everything calmly." At exactly 10 a.m., Andrew appeared. He was dressed casually in jeans and a blue t-shirt, ironically or perhaps intentionally, the same color as the one he wore on the day of the accident, so many years ago. He brought a small gift bag in his hands. "Good morning," he greeted cheerfully, crouching down to be at Peter's height. "Oh, you must be the dinosaur expert who's going to guide us today, am I right?" Peter smiled shyly, but soon his shyness was overcome by enthusiasm when Andrew gave him the gift, an illustrated book about paleontology adapted for children. "Wow, thank you, Mr. Andrew," the boy exclaimed, leafing through the colorful pages with reverence. "Just Andrew, please," he gently corrected, standing up to meet Casey's gaze. "I hope I didn't overdo it." "It's perfect," she replied sincerely, "but you really didn't need to." "I know," Andrew softly interrupted. "I wanted to do this." The three spent the following hours exploring the exhibition, with Peter leading the way, sharing surprisingly accurate facts about each creature they encountered. Andrew showed genuine interest, asking questions and listening attentively to the boys' enthusiastic explanations. Casey observed the interaction between them with a growing feeling of tenderness. During a snack break, while Peter was entertained with an interactive paleontological puzzle near the table where they sat, Andrew turned to Casey. "He's amazing," he commented, watching the boy. "So intelligent and curious." "Yes, he is," Casey agreed with pride. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough for him. If he has everything he needs to develop all that potential." "He has you," Andrew replied simply. "And from what I see, that's more valuable than anything else you could give him." Casey felt her eyes moisten with unexpected tears. Rarely did someone recognize her efforts in this way. To the outside world, she was just another overwhelmed young woman, trying to handle too many responsibilities with too few resources. "Thank you for saying that," she murmured. "Sometimes it's hard to believe I'm doing a good job." "You're doing an extraordinary job," Andrew insisted, his voice loaded with conviction. "And I know Ellen would be incredibly proud of both of you." The mention of her mother's name made Casey catch her breath. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I met her only briefly, but enough to see how much she loved you," Andrew replied. "During those hours in the hospital, while we waited for news, she wouldn't stop asking about you, even while in pain. And when she talked about you two, it was as if all the fatigue disappeared from her face." Casey lowered her eyes, absorbing those words that were like a precious gift. A glimpse of her mother through someone else's eyes, a confirmation that her memories were real. "You know what she told me?" Andrew continued, his voice soft. "She said, 'My Casey is too strong for her own good, always taking care of everyone, never allowing anyone to take care of her. It seems some things haven't changed.'" Casey smiled through contained tears. "I'm trying to get better at that," she admitted. "Allowing people to help, accepting that I don't need to carry everything alone." "It's a good start," Andrew replied, and hesitantly extended his hand across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers in a gesture so subtle it could be accidental. But it wasn't, and they both knew it. It was a first step, a door opening to possibilities that neither had allowed themselves to consider until then. At that moment, watching Peter play in the sun, feeling the gentle touch of Andrew's hand on hers, Casey understood she was witnessing the blossoming of something that had begun 15 years ago on a rainy road. Not an ending, but a new beginning. Fall arrived in Carlsville, painting the trees with shades of gold and red. 3 months had passed since the zoo outing, and much had changed at Valley Star Supermarket. What had begun as small anonymous gestures between Andrew and Casey had transformed into a culture that permeated the entire store. Employees left coffees on the desks of colleagues who seemed tired, covered each other's shifts without complaining, shared rides and advice. The change was so noticeable that even customers commented on the welcoming atmosphere they found there. In the monthly satisfaction surveys, the branch had jumped from 10th to 1st place in the chain, with specific praise for the team's cordiality. Regional management took note, and Andrew was invited to present his humanized management method at the company's annual convention. But the deepest transformations were happening behind the scenes, in the individual lives that were touched daily. Teresa, the pastry chef, finally gathered the courage to enroll in the culinary course she had always dreamed of taking. Mr. Joe, the security guard, started bringing his wife with Alzheimer's to store events, gradually reintegrating her into social life. Lucy, previously so bitter, now led a support group for elderly caregivers, inspired by the experience with her own father. And then there were Casey and Andrew, whose relationship was evolving at a cautious but steady pace. What had begun as a partnership in acts of kindness had blossomed into something deeper. Simple dinners after work, Sunday outings with Peter, long conversations on Friday nights when the boy slept at friends' houses. Small moments that together built a new reality for both. That Saturday morning, Casey woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen of her small apartment. She got up and walked silently down the hallway, stopping to observe the scene unfolding. Andrew and Peter, both wearing improvised aprons, preparing what appeared to be an elaborate breakfast. There was flour everywhere, eggshells in the sink, and a delicious smell of pancakes in the air. "No, Peter, you have to flip it when bubbles start appearing on the surface," Andrew patiently explained, guiding the boy's hand that held the spatula. "Like this, see? Perfect." Peter smiled proudly when he managed to flip the pancake without breaking it. "Casey will love it, won't she?" he asked anxiously. "No doubt," Andrew replied, affectionately messing up the boy's hair. "Who wouldn't love dinosaur-shaped pancakes?" Casey felt her heart expand with the scene. It was as if a puzzle was finally completing itself, pieces fitting into places she didn't even know were empty. In the last few months, Andrew had integrated so naturally into her life, into Peter's life, that it was difficult to remember what it was like before him. "Good morning, chefs," she finally announced her presence. "Casey!" Peter exclaimed, almost dropping the spatula. "It was supposed to be a surprise. You should be sleeping." "Sorry, I couldn't resist the smell," she replied, entering the kitchen. "Can I at least pretend to be surprised?" Andrew smiled, that smile that was now so familiar, that lit up his eyes even before reaching his lips. "I think the surprise is already spoiled," he commented, leaning in to deposit a soft kiss on her cheek. "But we still have the taste to surprise you." Breakfast was served at the small table in the living room, decorated with wildflowers that Andrew had brought. Peter talked non-stop about the science project he was developing at school, a model of the solar system, with planets made from recycled materials, while devouring his pancakes generously covered with honey. "And the teacher said my Jupiter is the best in the class," he concluded proudly. "That's amazing, Peter," Andrew replied with genuine enthusiasm. "When it's ready, I want to see that complete solar system." "You'll see it today," the boy exclaimed. "Right, Casey? Andrew's coming with us to the science fair, right?" Casey exchanged a look with Andrew. They hadn't discussed this yet. "If he can, of course," she replied diplomatically. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Andrew assured, and Peter's smile was reward enough. After breakfast, while Peter was getting ready for the fair, Casey and Andrew washed the dishes side by side in the small kitchen. "Are you sure you don't mind going?" she asked softly. "I know you had plans to visit your aunt in Ridgeville today." "I can go another day," he replied simply. "This is important for Peter, for both of you." Casey stopped what she was doing, drying her hands on the dish towel. "Andrew, I need to tell you something." He also stopped, turning to her with an attentive expression. "What is it?" "These last months have been the happiest that Peter and I have had in a long time," she began, the words coming out with difficulty. "You brought something to our lives that I didn't even know was missing, a feeling of completeness." Andrew left the plate he was holding in the sink and took her hands between his. "You both brought that to me too, Casey," he replied with a choked voice. "Before finding you again, I was just existing, fulfilling a promise but not really living. There was a moment of silence loaded with emotion, as if both were on the edge of a precipice, ready to take a leap of faith. "I have something for you," Andrew finally said, releasing her hands to take something from his pocket. "I was waiting for the right moment, and I think it's now." He extended a small package, no bigger than the palm of a hand, delicately wrapped in sky-blue paper. Casey accepted it with trembling fingers, carefully undoing the bow. Inside was a small velvet box, and inside it, a silver pendant in the shape of an angel. It wasn't an expensive jewel, but its meaning was priceless. "To replace the drawing," Andrew gently explained. "A reminder that sometimes angels enter our lives when we least expect and return when we need them most." Casey felt tears spring to her eyes as Andrew took the pendant from her hands and delicately fastened it on a thin chain around her neck. "It's perfect," she murmured, touching the small angel that now rested above her heart. "There's one more thing," Andrew continued, suddenly seeming nervous. "Something I want to ask both of you, actually. But maybe it's better to wait until after the science fair." "Ask what?" Peter's voice sounded behind them. The boy was standing at the kitchen entrance, already dressed in his solar system t-shirt, observing them with curious eyes. Andrew and Casey exchanged a surprised look. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Well, since you're here, I guess I can ask both of you together," Andrew said, crouching down to be at Peter's height. "I've been thinking, my apartment is too big for just one person, and it's closer to your school, Peter, and there's a park right across from it with lots of space to play and—" "Are you inviting us to live with you?" Peter asked directly, with the disconcerting honesty of children. Andrew smiled, nervous. "Yes, that's exactly it. What do you think? You and your sister, the three of us together." Peter considered the proposal for a moment, his small face serious with the responsibility of the decision. "You make my sister smile," he finally declared, "and you make dinosaur pancakes, and you know things about space. I think it would be cool." Andrew laughed, relieved, and turned to Casey, who was watching the scene with a mixture of emotions on her face. "And you?" he asked softly. "What do you think?" Casey felt the weight of the angel pendant against her skin, like a physical reminder of the journey they had traveled, from the hidden tears in the employee room to the love that now filled her life. It was a circle closing, a story that had begun in pain and now was flowering into possibilities. "I think it's about time we let someone take care of us too," she replied, her voice firm despite the tears that now ran freely. "I think we're ready for this new chapter." The science fair at Jefferson Elementary School was full of proud parents, enthusiastic teachers, and nervous children with their projects. Peter's solar system occupied a prominent place, with colorful planets orbiting a sun made of hand-painted styrofoam balls. Next to it, a poster explained each planet in the boy's careful handwriting. While Peter animatedly explained his project to the judges, Casey and Andrew observed from a distance, hands discreetly intertwined. "Look at him," Casey murmured with pride. "So confident, so happy, just like his sister," Andrew replied, gently squeezing her hand. At that moment, Teresa appeared among the crowd, waving enthusiastically. As the grandmother of a student at the same school, she was also there to attend the fair. "Oh, good to find you," she exclaimed, approaching. Her astute eyes soon noticed the joined hands and the pendant on Casey's neck. "Finally made it official, huh? It was about time." Casey blushed, but didn't let go of Andrew's hand. "We're moving forward carefully," she responded diplomatically. "Well, whatever it is, I'm happy for you," Teresa declared sincerely. "And from what I see, I'm not the only one." She discreetly pointed to the other side of the hall, where several supermarket employees were scattered among the visitors. Mr. Joe with his wife, Lucy with her father in his newly fixed motorized wheelchair, Nancy and even Marcy, the checkout coordinator. "What are they doing here?" Casey asked, surprised. "We came to support our little scientist, of course," Teresa replied as if it were obvious. "Family isn't just who has the same blood, dear. It's who chooses to be there in the important moments." Casey felt a lump in her throat at that unexpected demonstration of solidarity and affection. All of them, somehow, had been touched by the small gestures that she and Andrew had initiated months ago. Like waves in a lake, those actions had expanded far beyond what they could imagine, creating a community where before there were just co-workers. When the awards were announced, and Peter received second place in the Space Sciences category, the small group from Valley Star, applauded with more enthusiasm than any other, making the boy blush with pride and happiness. Later, as they walked home under the orange sky of late afternoon, Peter ran ahead, proudly displaying his medal to anyone who passed by. "I think we found our purpose, didn't we?" Andrew commented, his arm comfortably around Casey's shoulders. "That promise I made to my mother, to use my life to make a difference, I never imagined it would materialize like this. And that promise I made to my mother, to always take care of Peter, to build a good life for us," Casey completed. "It's also taking a direction I could never have predicted." They stopped for a moment, watching Peter, who was now absorbed examining a beetle on the path. "You know what impresses me most?" Andrew reflected. "How it all started with a simple moment of kindness. A stranger stopping to help on the road on a rainy day. And then, years later, another moment of kindness. A manager respecting an employee's silent crying," Casey added. "Small gestures," Andrew murmured. "Small gestures that change everything." As the sun set over Carlsville, casting long golden shadows on the path ahead, Casey thought about all the coincidences, choices and moments that had led to this exact instant. A childish drawing kept for years, an anonymous note on the board, a plant for rainy days, a dinosaur lunchbox. Each small gesture, a seed planted that now bloomed into something larger and more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. And at the center of it all, two people who had learned that sometimes the most important circles in life take time to complete, that some stories need years to find their true beginning, and that kindness, even when it seems insignificant, is never wasted. It just patiently waits for the right moment to reveal its fruits. "Peter, don't go too far," Casey called, seeing her brother move too far away in his entomological exploration. "I'm just seeing if there are more beetles for my next project," he replied, waving enthusiastically. Andrew laughed, that easy laugh that was now a constant part of their days. "Already planning the next project? The boy is ambitious." "Just like his sister," Casey replied, repeating the words he had used earlier and feeling for the first time in a long time completely at peace with her past, her present, and especially with the future that now lay ahead of them, no longer as a solitary struggle but as a shared journey. That night after Peter finally fell asleep, exhausted but happy with his day of achievements, Casey found Andrew on the small balcony of the apartment, contemplating the city lights. He had in his hands the framed drawing, the blue-shirted angel she had made so many years ago. "This will look perfect on the wall of the new living room," he commented when he felt her approach. "Our first decoration item." "The first of many," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Together they observed the city that had witnessed the beginning, the middle, and now the continuation of their story. Somewhere out there, new stories were beginning. People crossing paths, moments of kindness being shared, seeds being planted to bloom years later. And in the stars that began to dot the night sky, Casey imagined that perhaps somehow Ellen and Caroline were watching too. Two mothers who, through their examples of strength and kindness, had shaped the hearts of those they left behind, creating a legacy that now perpetuated itself in each small gesture of love. "Thank you," she murmured, both to Andrew and to the universe that had conspired to bring them here. "For what?" he asked softly. "For stopping on that road, for noticing my tears in that room, for having the courage to plant seeds without knowing if you would ever see the flowers." Andrew smiled, pulling her closer. "Some flowers," he replied, looking significantly at the half-open door of the room where Peter slept, "are worth all the waiting in the world."